National Park workers search and rescue officers of Reddit. What is the strangest creepiest thing you've seen on the job? Our volunteer fire department was called out to assist in a search for a missing man. When we arrived on scene, we were informed that he was a convict, out on work release, and hadn't returned to the prison. He'd told people that he'd rather die than go back. They found his car on a backwoods road, near a gas pipeline trail. He went missing on Wednesday. It was now Saturday. We split into 2-person teams and headed into the woods. We figured we would wander around for a few hours, not find anything, then go home. Someone came and picked the guy up, and he was long gone. About 20 minutes in, our captain calls in on the radio. Found him. Subject deceased. We came up over the rise, and the guy was standing there, facing away from us. He looked like he was taking a leak. He had walked about 1-2 miles back in on the gas line, tied a rope to a small tree, and hanged himself. The tree bent over so he was standing up. He asphyxiated instead of breaking his neck. He stood there, dead and staring, for 3 days. I work in a national forest in California. Every day I drive on a very narrow, very twisty road that snakes through a river gorge. There are guardrails on some sections of the road, but majority of it has a steep drop off into the canyon. This summer I was making my rounds, driving merrily up the road when I see a person with a blue sheet over their head, think like a Halloween ghost costume but with no eye holes, walking down the center of the road. I jaw drop and frantically honk my horn. There is no way I can swerve without driving off the road. The person steps out of the way just in time for me to avoid sideswiping her. Before I can pull over and radio for help, a truck comes around a blind curve and hits her, making her tumble down the ravine. After her body was retrieved and identified, we learned that it was a girl who had been missing for over a year. I wasn't a ranger or anything, but I worked for a ski resort in Colorado for a couple years. One of the places I worked, my boss and I rode snowmobiles up the Gulch Road every day to get to the restaurant we worked at. Anyway, we saw a couple things that were out of the ordinary. Coming down the road one afternoon a couple miles down, we found a little girl sitting on the side of the road, barefoot in the snow. Apparently she had somehow managed to veer off the ski trails and ski down the road for a little bit. When she realized she was lost, she decided to walk. She walked for a while in her ski boots, but then I guess she figured she could walk faster barefoot. So she took off the boots and her socks and walked a good ways barefoot. She was freezing and terrified when we found her. Poor thing. We radioed for ski patrol and wrapped her up in blankets and gave her some hand warmers while we waited. Another thing we found wasn't creepy, but it was funny as hell. We came around a corner in on the road, and off to the right side among some fallen trees was a mostly naked woman, bent over a log, with her mostly naked boyfriend or husband, pounding away behind her. He waved, we laughed, waved, and kept going. Worked at a summer camp for a while as a teen. While walking towards the staff cabins we see a dark figure peering into one of the windows. My buddy and I walk over and see it's some dirty looking dude like he just crawled out of the wetlands bordering the camps. We say hello and the dude looks at us and books it into the wetlands. Pretty sure it was a homeless dude. Later that summer another one was caught sleeping in one of the campsites a day before the kids arrived and we had to do walk around each site looking for hobos from there on out. Worked for the park service for 7 years. For one winter I was stationed down in Calaloch at Olympic National Park. I was one of only 3 employees that had full-time employment during this time. I lived on the premise in a small apartment and would often walk over to the main building at night to work out at the gym. It was always empty at this time. Nobody else lived there during the weekend. When I was done I would make my rounds and ensure all the lights were out and doors were locked. Outside of one of the bunkhouses was an unfinished shed that had an overhead light on it. The control for the light was inside the shed and locked. I would turn that light off almost every night, only to find it on in the morning, without fail. It wasn't on a timer. Nobody else was around that had access. I've spent my whole life working in the woods. I'm completely at home when outside in the dark. I could not walk from my apartment to the main building. At night, without wanting to run every single time. Random employees would come to the bunkhouse throughout the winter to stay the night on weekdays while on assignment. Numerous employees complained of bumps in the night and odd noises. Some refused to stay in the second floor entirely. One man even saw an apparition disappear through the wall of his room and refused to stay there any longer. All came to me with their stories, unprompted throughout the winter. I have many more oddities over the years, just too long to type on mobile. I used to work at one of the big desert national parks out in the southwest US where a lot of mysterious stuff could happen in the middle of nowhere. One of my jobs was doing bat surveys, so my team would hike out to remote canyons and find caves and identify any bats we found inside. One trip we were in a remote canyon and found a cave halfway up a cliff face. We carefully scrambled up there, and once we got deeper inside the cave, we found a tent. It looked like a stereotypical hobo camp. The tent was one of those family car camping tents, with a heavy tarp bottom, not a light backpacking tent. It was run down and partially collapsed, and looked like it had been trampled, and it was surrounded by black plastic trash bags, food that had been chewed by mice, ratty old clothing, and used toilet paper. And it was way inside a cave, or 3+ hour drive from the nearest tiny town, and a 3-hour hike from the trailhead. I use the term loosely, cause we weren't even on a real trail. It looked like it had been there a while. My optimistic hope is that an unprepared hiker tried to do a hike that was out of their league. It was way hotter than they expected, so they camped in a cave to stay cool, and the long, nearly vertical hike back out of the canyon was too much, so they ditched their tent and trash and food so they wouldn't have as much to carry out. But on the other hand, this is a huge park with literally thousands of miles of backcountry that gets almost no visitation. In the year I worked there, 10 people, that I know of, died in the park, and less than a month after this trip someone died of heat stroke in the same canyon. People go missing regularly, and are often never found. A lot of people try to hike across parts of the park, and hitchhike and get dropped off instead of leaving a car they have to hike back to. Once they're in the park, a lot of people set up basa camps, then take day packs to explore even more remote side canyons, where they can easily get hurt or in trouble without anyone knowing where they are. Whoever left their tent and food behind must have been in really desperate shape or got hurt without help, and easily could have died out with ever being found. Here's a story from a friend of a friend. He is working a deer tag checkpoint, and he comes across a group in an interesting situation. This group had come out a couple days before deer season opened to get some target practice in. They got loaded while shooting and one guy's ear was shot off. When an ear is removed there is a lot of blood, so in their drunken wisdom, his friends think, what stops bleeding? A tourniquet. That'll work. So, they put one around his neck and tightened that sucker down. Our ranger friend coming upon the scene. The guy's turning blue and missing an ear. We used this story to teach Boy Scouts to not do drugs or alcohol, especially before or during shooting. I just work for a county park, but I get there before the sunrise and I've definitely been weirded out once or twice. First off, possums, raccoons, foxes, and coyotes all make a variety of peculiar noises, many of which I was not previously familiar with. Some sound like demons, some sound like crying children, some are just kinda their own thing and defy immediate description. The only creepy thing I've ever seen have been lights in the woods. It's hard to tell how far away they are. I would guess 300-400 m, but it's dark. They're a yellowish sort of white, and appear to quickly and smoothly fade on and off in the span of about a second. I've only ever seen one light at a time, and after it happens once there are no repeats. It's too bright to be a firefly, not bright enough to be a distant car, and too smooth and random to be someone with a flashlight. My imagination has drifted to stories of will-o-wisps, but I think it's probably just some kind of bioluminescence or else an optical illusion brought about by squinting to see through a darkened forest. I worked for a pizza place in Yosemite National Park. This one kinda off-seeming guy came in and asked for mushrooms on his pizza. But like, not just mushrooms. Demanded the thing was absolutely smothered in mushrooms. He told us to remake it twice because there were not enough mushrooms. By the time it was satisfactory for him, it was inedible for most people. National parks attract some weird ones. One of our properties has an abandoned hunting shack on it. My coworker and I decided to check it out to see if it was creepy, and it wasn't. No vandalism, due to being on private property deep in the woods, just some hangers and boxes labeled files. We left, and made sure to shut the door tight so animals bugs wouldn't get in. We passed the shack the next day in our buggy, and the door was wide open, but the screen door was shut. No one goes on this property and hunting has ceased there. My thoughts were towards Oshit. Someone's making a meth lab here. I closed the door using my machete while calling out, if anyone's in there, it's none of my business. My dad is a warden at a provincial park in Canada. It's a wilderness park that mostly just has people's cabins and other stuff they want to do with LUPs, land use permits, so most of his job is to deal with people not paying, breaking rules on their permitted land. He was told that somebody was living in the park without a permit, so he went to the area, alone, and found about 3 dozen doll heads on sharpened sticks surrounding a small cabin with smoke coming out of the chimney. He knocked on the door but nobody was home, so he left a fine for building without an LUP, almost $1,000. The next week it was paid for by an old man that came into the office. He said he put the heads up to scare away people. My dad said he seemed a bit off, but mostly harmless. Needless to say, he was still super creeped out. I was on a rapid trip in the middle of nowhere. We were camping in tents on the shore. I was completely ill-prepared and ended up soaked. I walked a mile back to camp to change while my friends stayed at the main camp. While I was changing, did it outside as there was nothing there and I had a small tent. I felt like someone was watching me. So much so that I shoved into the tent to complete dressing. Once dressed, I ran back out to the main house, just freaked out. Honestly forgot all about it until my friend called after the trip and said I was pretty funny, but who was it? Mind you, this was before cell phones, waterproof cameras, etc. My friend said that all 5 cameras at our tent camp had several pen 15 pics. Timing of the pics on the roll would point to when I was at camp alone. Still makes me feel cold inside.